You're thinking about studying in Australia? Sure, it sounds like a dream. Beautiful beaches, beautiful kangaroos, cute and furry animals, even picking up the cool Australian accent. But before you pack your bags, there is quite a couple of things you do need to know and understand before deciding to make that move to Australia to study. Let's get real. Is it all sunshine and surf? Or is it some hidden surprises that you might need to know about? In this video, we're going to go through the bad, the good, but also things that you probably do need to know about and understand before you make that decision to come into Australia to study. I've had the privilege of graduating from not one, but two major Australian universities. I've spent over 6 years studying alongside international students, many of whom became close friends, and through them, I've learned firsthand about the challenges and rewards of studying in Australia from an international student's perspective. So while my experience is local, my understanding is global, and I'm here to share what I've learned with you. Welcome to the Borderless Network. Today we're tackling a crucial topic, and a topic that quite a few of my audience have been thinking about, studying in Australia, making the move to do that. I'm sure you've seen multiple videos on YouTube already just explaining the visa process into getting to Australia, but there aren't many videos out there that really try and talk about coming to Australia and studying. Is it all what it's cracked out to be? Sure, there are quite a lot of positives and quite a lot of benefits that come from being able to study in Australia. But there are also some negatives that most people don't really talk about, involving costs, involving the visa process, involving, even the way and quality of life. There are things that you probably do need to understand and do need to get your head around before you make that crucial decision to apply for the visa to go and pack your bags to Australia. By the end of this video, I'm hoping that you will get a clearer and more holistic understanding about studying in Australia, the advantages, the disadvantages, the upsides, the downsides, and to make your decision a little bit more informed. First, let's talk about the benefits. Let's start with the good, right? Australia is jam-packed with some of the world's best universities. University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, University of New South Wales, Macquarie University. And some of these institutions are world-renowned, and they do always admit a lot of international students. The education system here is renowned for its teaching methods, its innovative use of technology in terms of teaching and learning, and also the quality of teaching. Australia does hire some of the best professors and some of the best educators in the world. And you'll be benefiting a lot from learning from such educators who have dozens of years in experience working professionally or in the academic field. So I think it's a very good choice in terms of the quality of education. You definitely will not be losing out on that. Having a degree in Australia is definitely very advantageous for your career prospects and is also highly regarded amongst other universities and world-renowned universities right around the world. Another major benefit is the multicultural connections that you may actually experience whilst you're in Australia. Another thing that most people don't really talk about is that a lot of these universities in Australia admit a whole lot of international students, and Australian universities are mostly seen like a major international community and an international hub filled with so many students from across different backgrounds, cultures, creeds. So it's also a really good opportunity if you are looking to be part of a multicultural, being part of a more diverse kind of community. Australian universities is jam-packed full of that, and I think you would definitely benefit from that if that is something that you are eager to look into. Living in cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide give you access of a dynamic range of resources, world-class facilities, a thriving job market. All of these amenities that a good city would have would increase quality of life. Of course, we go into the negatives in a second, but just focusing on the positives, you would benefit from being in a technological advanced society, a society that's very much based on using cutting edge to make life easier. In Macquarie University, University of Technology, and some of the, plus Australia has a strong focus on student support and student services. And that is actually very key, especially if you're an international student and you are most likely in unfamiliar territory. You don't really know many people. You don't really know where to look for support. Every single university in Australia has a very strong, or aims to have a strong, student support network that allows students to integrate well, especially international students to integrate well within the environment that they're in, to cope well with some of the changes and the pressures involved with moving to a new country to study. And I think it's very much beneficial if you are someone who is looking to move to Australia, but not quite sure of the amount of support that you might be given. Australian universities especially do have a very good and strong support network. There are also numerous scholarships available for international students to make also the costs, which we will get into as a negative, but some of the costs can be alleviated due to the wide range of scholarships available in each Australian university. That could also be something that you are looking for, and I do heavily encourage to look into scholarships. You never ever know what you may be eligible for and what you may actually get as a scholarship. So I wouldn't ignore those. However, studying in Australia, as I have said, doesn't come without its challenges and come with its disadvantages. One of the biggest hurdles that a lot of people would face if they are traveling to Australia to study is the cost. Cost. Australia is not a cheap place to live, especially in the major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Tuition fees can be quite high, especially for international students. So let's just break down some of the tuition costs for international students based on different courses and disciplines. So in the humanities and social sciences, the tuition for those disciplines range between 20,000 Australian dollars to 30,000 Australian dollars per year. So in humanities and social sciences, I'm talking about sociology, talking about those disciplines that are focused on human society and human condition and community service. So that's something to look out for. Business and management, that range between 25,000 to 35,000 per year. Engineering, 30,000 to 40,000 dollars per year. Information technology, 30,000 to 40,000 Australian dollars per year. Law, 30,000 to 42,000 dollars per year. Reason why this is also quite high is because it's quite a demanding degree and also quite competitive. A lot of universities have law as one of their top admissions in terms of students coming in and wanting to do law. Medicine, 60,000 to 80,000 dollars per year. Kind of a no-brainer. Medicine is quite a demanding and a highly competitive degree, and is also one of the more prestigious degrees along with law. Nursing, 28,000 to 35,000 dollars a year. Nursing has seen quite a lot of changes over the years, primarily because influx of people coming into Australia to do nursing in the past decade has definitely increased. Science and mathematics, 25,000 to 38,000 dollars per year. Again, very much similar, depending on what's demanded and what's needed. This can change and vary. But these are just average figures. Exact tuition is depending on the university and the specific course that you're deciding to do. And also universities such as University of Sydney, New South Wales, University of Melbourne, Australian National University in Canberra and the capital city. These universities are prestigious, they're higher ranking, so of course they'll demand more in tuition fees. So if you are looking to study in Australia, but you're not too fussed about where you want to study, as long as you just want to find a decent university to study and a decent discipline to study, I would recommend not going for those high prestigious degrees, which in Australia we call the Go-8 universities. It's basically Australia's version of the Ivy League in America. You can go for the more fringe universities or the smaller universities, private colleges that offer the same disciplines, the same courses, just not as prestigious. But again, when it comes to the job market, all it really matters is your experience and your ability to convey what you've learnt. So those prestigious universities do come with disadvantages, which is why its cost is high. But another disadvantage that I would also like to touch on is the cost of living in Australia. And it's definitely increased since COVID. And I'm just going to give a bit of a quick rundown on the average monthly costs that I've got here. A one-bedroom apartment in the city centre for some of the several major cities. So in Sydney is probably the most expensive city in Australia and probably the most populous city in Australia, primarily because of its proximity to some of the key services that you would need. And the average monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Sydney is 2,800 Australian dollars per month. That is quite a lot. And it's definitely increased and will increase in the coming years. Followed by Melbourne, also high expensive, but not as expensive as Sydney, with $2,200 per month. Again, Melbourne, very much similar to Sydney in terms of its access to amenities. It's also quite an international city. Brisbane, $2,000 per month. On the cheaper end, Brisbane is the capital city in Queensland, which is north of Sydney. And Brisbane also international city, access to a lot of amenities. May not be as populated as Sydney and Melbourne, but also is a pretty good location and something that people do overlook. Perth, $1,800 per month. So Perth is on the western side of Australia, far western side of Australia. And yeah, you can see it's not as big as Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, but definitely a really good city. It's also a little bit of an international city, I would say. So if you choose to live outside the city centre, these prices definitely will be cheaper for you. It will not be within this range, which is, I would say the average in Australia would be around 2,000 Australian dollars per month. If you do live outside the city center, but probably in more regional or rural areas, that your prices can drop down to 20 to 30%. But do take in mind that you will have to factor in commuting costs, the time it takes you to commute. That is something to consider. I would say there are some universities, especially rural universities, that you can look into. The admissions are very much smaller in size, but they are cheaper. So I would consider that if costs would be definitely a glaring point for you. Now, on top of rent, you need to budget for other expenses like groceries, utility bills, transportation. And on average, a student in Australia might spend around 1,500 Australian dollars to 2,000 Australian dollars per month on living expenses, depending on the city and your lifestyle. So it's essential to have a clear financial plan and budget before making the move. Another challenge is also balancing work and study. Now, whilst Australia does allow international students to work while they study, there is a limit to 20 hours per week. And during the semester, juggling part-time work with challenging coursework, can be a little bit tough. And let's not forget the visa requirements. You have to stay compliant with your student visa, and that can be stressful. 20 hours a week whilst trying to survive in, middle of inner city Sydney is definitely one of the most challenging things you could possibly do, probably near impossible. With the cost of living in, major city centers, I would recommend for an international student to not focus on living right in the middle of Sydney, Melbourne, even Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane. I would focus on living, I guess, not too far from the city centre, in suburban areas, maybe an hour or so public transport right away. Before you decide, I would recommend thinking about a few practical considerations to keep in mind. First, think about the long-term benefits. So don't just think, getting the student visa and just thinking about your time studying. Think about what happens after. Think about what you're going to be doing afterwards. So if you are thinking of working in Australia, at least for a temporary period of time, or you are thinking of a long-term progression to a permanent residency in Australia, I would definitely recommend getting the temporary graduate visa. However, this pathway does require careful planning, and it does require you to be able to find a job after you do finish your degree. And the job market in Australia, I will say this, is definitely a lot more challenging for international students, depending on the discipline. I could say this for sure, depending on the discipline itself, you could pick the wrong discipline that is not really required or does not really require the skills of an international student or someone who is international over a domestic student or the candidate for a role that is a domestic student. I would be very careful in terms of picking the right course and the right institution. So again, think about the long-term benefits. Think beyond just studying. Of course, if you are planning to, travel back to your home country after you've finished your degree, this is not something you should really worry about. And, giving yourself the best possible chance and opportunity in terms of your career. Also consider your lifestyle preferences. Do you prefer, the hustle and bustle of a big city, the noisiness, the fast-paced kind of life? Or do you thrive in a quieter, more comfortable, an affordable town? Depends. There are definitely universities like the University of New England, which does focus on the rural areas and are based in rural areas. So if you are looking to a more quiet country kind of lifestyle, I would definitely look at universities and degrees in universities which are in more regional areas and rural areas of Australia. And then there's the visa process itself. Australian visas require a proof of financial stability, a health insurance, confirmation of enrollment from your institution. And the application process can be quite complex, and it's crucial to understand all the requirements before you apply. I would say some of the more sticking point in terms of the visa process is the financial stability. So in Australia, right now, beyond your tuition, you need to have enough financial backing, enough financial stability, prove to the immigration agent that you have enough funds for you to be able to survive financially. I think right now, beyond your tuition, you need to also have another additional $21,000 at the very least to, support yourself in terms of your accommodation, food, textbooks, all these kind of things. That is the minimum amount at this point in time. This could change and is subject to change depending on what the Australian government may decide. So yeah, it's very important to do your research, very important to look into the process. And I would definitely highly recommend outsourcing some of this stressful work with a migration agent who can properly explain to you the requirements. But be careful, there are a lot of migration agents out there that are fraudulent. So another way that I would definitely be able to ensure that you are dealing with the right migration agent is to go through the school or the university that you're looking to study at. And just to, each university has a list of registered agents who are qualified, who are verified, who are certified. And that way you can, be at ease of mind knowing that you are dealing with a legitimate migration agent. And remember, every student's experience is different. Every student's goals is different. What may work for one person may not work for you. Talk to current and former students. Do your research. Go on forums. One forum I definitely do highly recommend going on is Board of Studies. That is a long-time forum based in Australia and really focuses on some of the issues and questions that a lot of international students, domestic students face in Australia academically. And it's definitely a more holistic kind of forum, but go beyond that. Do your research thoroughly. And if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more insights on studying and working abroad. Various countries. I provide updates every week. Thank you for watching. Peace.